This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Mike Sedita.
Episode 40 of the Good Neighbor Podcast. My name is Mike Sedita, and I am lucky enough to be joined today by Sam Abukadir, who is the founder of the Florida Probate and Family Law Firm. Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. You pronounce my name so well. I'm proud of you.
Oh, thank you very much. I told you if I write it down and do it phonetically, I could remember it. I could do it pretty good. I'm a quick. I don't look smart, but occasionally I have a good moment here or there. So, you having a good day today?
We are, except for the rain, but that's fine.
Yeah, it's only another 3 months of rain, and then we'll be fine. We'll be able to enjoy our nice warm winter. A little bit really quick about what the Good Neighbor Podcast is. So we set the expectations and you know what we do and how we do it. So back in 2020 during COVID, when everybody had to be socially distant, a gentleman by the name of Charlie McDermott started the Good Neighbor Podcast in Southwest Florida. And it was just a way for businesses like yours, firms and philanthropic groups and charities and people in the community to tell the residents in the community what they do, to create a way to connect the businesses or the charities to the community. That's how we got started. It's a real simple format. It's you and I sitting here having a conversation, talking about some generalities of things in your business. And the nice thing is, when we started it back in 2020, it was just one podcast. Now we're a national podcast. We're all over the United States. And for me, fortunately, I'm the person in Tampa who gets to talk to businesses like yours, firms like yours, and find out about what they do and how they do it. So with that being said, tell us a little bit about the Florida Probate and Family Law Firm.
First of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. A little bit about my firm. I established it almost 5 years ago with myself and a part-time law clerk. That part-time law clerk is now an associate attorney in my probate division. And we are now somewhere between 25 to 30 team members. So 1.5 to 25 to 30 team members in less than 5 years. I'm super proud of. We have won a ton of awards in the past 5 years. And we have offices all over the state of Florida now. We are about to be 7 offices all over the state of Florida. Half of the practice is family law. The other half of the practice is probate law. So the way I like to explain it is family, anything to do with family, divorce, child custody, alimony, prenups, postnups, domestic violence, unfortunately, anything family related. And then the other half of the practice is probate, which everyone's like, what the heck does that mean? And it basically covers estates. So administration and litigation. So when people are fighting over inheritances or not fighting and just need to get stuff, guardianships and estate planning. So that pretty much sums up the firm.
You know, that first off, let me go back to something before we came on air. I had said, and people, if you are interested, I was just pulling it up because I have it up on my computer. Go to floridaprobateandfamilylaw.com. And you will see, it looks like a modeling agency. It looks like it is like everybody. The men are handsome. The women are pretty. They're all clearly smart because they're attorneys. Like, it is well done. Whoever designed your website did a great job. The people that work there, go and check out their website. That being said, some of the stickiest things that come out, like when you're talking about estates and probate, when people are fighting over inheritance, that is some of the ugliest. I mean, divorce is pretty ugly, but that is some of the ugliest of humanity that comes out during that time. Is that a difficult thing for your team and your staff to deal with? Or do you guys have tactics in place to be able to mitigate some of that kind of that angst, that dirtiness, that arguing, that bickering?
So that's a great question. So I should probably backtrack and tell you that my husband and I both practice in this area. And the reason we got into this area, even though in law school I didn't know what I wanted to do, was because we did an internship with the administrative probate judge. And in going to court every day and watching all of the trials where families were fighting over what their parents, their siblings, their grandparents left them, it started to become really juicy. as terrible as that sounds. So when you think about divorce litigation, you think people are cheating, there's something going on, spending money.
Right.
Probate is just as juicy. There's money that falls out of ceilings sometimes in some of our homes. There's gold buried in the backyard. I mean, it is crazy stuff that we see in our cases. And so is it hard? Yes, because you never like to see families fighting, but unfortunately our practice deals with divorce and death, the double Ds. So there's always something going on. And what we try to do is help our clients get through it as amicably as possible, even in a litigation, because the last thing we want people to do is spend thousands and thousands of dollars on their attorneys and then end up with very little.
Is that the last thing you want people to do? Okay, that's just a bad lawyer joke. I'm sorry. So
I do, because I wouldn't want an attorney to treat me that way.
Well, and that's what I was kind of getting to with all of that is being on the proactive side of what you guys do. So if people are actually coming to you ahead of time and putting the documents in place properly, so that when the terrible instance comes where grandma dies or dad dies or whatever the case may be, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, so it doesn't get to that point. But I would think even in those instances, there's always, or at least in my experience, I mean, personally or not personally, I won't say that, but there's always that one disgruntled person that is like, oh, I should have had this go on. So I would think even if you get everything buttoned up proactively, it limits that whole dark side of things. But there's still times when I'm assuming it rears its head.
So you hit it on the head, and I'm glad you said this. If you are proactive and you go and see an estate planning attorney for yourself, not for your parents, not for your grandparents, because that would be undue influence, procurement. You're not allowed in the process, right? If you're receiving. But if you're planning ahead of time, especially if you have minor kids, you don't want money going into the court system until they turn 18 and then a big fat check going to your 18-year-old. Not smart. If you go to an attorney, they'll advise you of trusts. They'll advise you of the instruments that you need to be drafted so that there's less likely a scenario where litigation would be involved. Another thing that we see, because we do the family side, is blended families. So people who get married who have children from the first marriage and then they end up having children from the second marriage, or no children from the second marriage, just the spouse, right? And then you have litigation in the estate once that person passes. So we also like to do certain documents to protect the new spouse and protect the children from the first marriage if that's their wish, right?
Right.
But you hit it right on the head. You have to get your planning in place, or at least speak to an estate planning attorney.
Oh, so many questions now. So all right. So in the scenario you just set forth, if there is no document in place and a couple gets together and they have a blended family and the husband passes away, everything goes to the spouse, right? By law, or does it, unless it's documented?
No. So in the state of Florida, since we practice in Florida, 50% would go to the spouse, 50% would go to the children.
Oh, so if there's nothing, it just defaults to that.
Correct. If there's no estate planning. However, if there's a homestead property, it could pass differently. If it's as husband and wife, then it might not necessarily go to the kids. It depends on the asset. Another example is if you have a POD account, pay on death. So if you have a Bank of America account and you put a beneficiary, then it's not going to go through the probate process and it will go to whoever you want.
Whoever's
but naturally, correct. But naturally, the law says that it would go 50-50 if you don't have your stuff in order.
And then on the other end of this, so do you also work in things like QITs or those type of documents, a qualified income trust for people on Medicare and Medicaid? Do you handle any of those cases?
So we do. It's not a big part of our practice, but it is asset protection. So basically what that means is if somebody has assets that wouldn't qualify them for Medicaid, we would be able to draft a certain type of trust so that they can qualify for Medicaid.
Right. Yeah, I ran into a lot of that taking care of my folks and kind of going through that. So this podcast really needed to happen like 5 years ago when you guys first opened. But, you know, I'm not going to hold that against you because you're an attorney and I don't want to get involved. But let's flip it up a little bit. So you talked about you and your husband. You guys went to law school. You went to undergrad together? Or like tell us a little bit about your personal journey. How did you decide, like when you were a little girl playing on the playground, on the swings or whatever you were doing, were you like, someday I want to shelter people's money through the law? Or did you just kind of fall into this?
No, I fell into it. So I went to FSU for undergrad. Go Knowles.
All right, I'm with you there. I'll give you that. I'm not a Gator fan.
All right, good to know. Good to know. And so I was pre-med. My dad is also a doctor. Didn't practice in the States, but practiced overseas. So I always wanted to be a doctor like him. So I was studying his books when I was little, and then junior year at FSU decided I really want a family. I don't know that I want to be in school forever.
12 more years.
Joke was on me. And so I took the GRE and I took the LSATs. And then a week before law school started, decided I was going to go to Florida International University College of Law, and didn't know what type of law I was going to practice. So I did a ton of internships, immigration, criminal defense, IP law, intellectual property, probate. I did a bunch of different things to see what would interest me. And then the last semester, my now husband told me, Sam, I just finished interning for the administrative probate judge. You've got to do this. So I did it.
So he dragged you along for the ride. He dragged you in. All right. So there's a couple questions from all of that. So what type of medicine did your dad practice? Was he a surgeon? Was he like a general practitioner? Like what kind of practice did he have?
Dermatology and infertility.
Wow, that's kind of a unique blend there, right? That's kind of unusual. So he got to pick at people's faces and then explore their privates to make sure that they could have babies and do all that stuff. He had everything going on there. And then when you were reading his books, was there one way you were leaning over the other if you were going to go into that?
Yeah, so I wanted to either be an OBGYN or a child psychiatrist.
They both have, I guess, advantages. And child psychiatrist is it got to be that's got to be tough. There's a lot of baggage that comes along with watching kids struggle, I would think, doing that. So I think you made the right juicy decision to be in probate and do the law stuff. So follow-up question to all that is what years were you at Florida State and how good was the football team those years?
Why would you do this to me?
I'm just curious. I'm assuming probably 7 or 8 years ago. Was it during a downturn, or you just don't remember and you're afraid Florida State?
I was there. I was there when we had really crappy football. I was there from 2006 to 2010. We did not have a good football season. But I went to every single game pretty much the 4 years.
So when you run into people around Tampa and they're doing the Gator chop thing or whatever, do you like try to feel out what years they're there? Because the Gator fans could be very, very let's see, what's the proper term to use about Gator? Obnoxious. Obnoxious is the term that I would use. Do you try to avoid that conversation because of the years you were there, or do you trash talk about better championships earlier in the Florida State history?
I try not to talk about it because it hurts. I mean, I love college football, and my husband is a UM fan. So
Oh my God, how are you guys together?
And one of our closest friends played for UM, so we're always talking about this.
So, all right, so he's a Miami fan, and does he ever just randomly say to you wide left or wide right, just to give you a hard time? Or does he at dinner, if you're doing something and you're getting under his skin, and just be wide left, and then it ends the conversation? You see, you're too young. You don't even remember that far back. That's how old I am.
You're not old.
So with all the locations you guys have in Florida, is this all starting from your first location here? Are they all under your umbrella, or are they separate offices that work in conjunction with you guys?
So they're all of our offices. Our first office started in Coral Gables, Florida. We opened up our Tampa office. Yeah, we opened up our Tampa office earlier this year. It's in the new Tampa area. And our goal is to basically service the entire state of Florida. So we want to be able, and I should have said this earlier, but I didn't grow up with a ton. So my goal with this firm is to service people that have similar families as my own and as my husband's, right? So we want to be able to help a diverse community of people. We want to make sure that there's access 2 legal services. More than 10% of our firm provides pro bono services. So it's something that we're passionate about, and we want to make sure proper representation is given to as many people in the community as possible.
So then let me ask you this question from a cultural standpoint. Is there a segment of cultural society that tends to be less protected, like chooses to do this less than others?
Yeah, so I'm Palestinian American. My husband is Cuban, Puerto Rican American. So we have the Hispanic and we have the Arab communities that usually come to us. And both communities, surprisingly, you find, and this is, I'm not generalizing, but you find stay-at-home moms who are not in control of the finances. And so you find them in really tough situations, sometimes domestic violence incidents. And so they're stuck. And my dad raised 3 strong women, and so did my mother. But my dad told us something very early on. You get your education, you make your own money, and you never depend on a man. So
good advice.
No offense, but
no, listen, it's good advice. I mean, that takes the pressure off men. I mean, honestly, it takes the pressure off a little bit. But no, that is that is a shame. Like, I know my parents are an older generation, and the way it was when they were around, it was kind of like the man worked, the woman stayed home. And I remember at one point in time, my mom kind of saying, like, I don't even really know. Like, she paid the bills, but she didn't really know how much money was there. Like, I almost felt like my dad always made her feel like, here's just enough to pay the stuff, and whatever else he had was kind of wherever he was doing with it. So there is a whole generation of people like that, but there is culturally, there's that just maybe are a little more not, I don't want to say uneducated, but not aware of what they need.
Correct.
Also, from a cultural standpoint, don't want to go to a lawyer. Like, they just, like, I know one of the communities I work in is a large Indian community, and they tend to kind of stay within themselves. They don't really go outside that community unless it's somebody specific they know, or they're not aware of some of the other stuff. So I was just curious if there was a group of people that you guys work with that you're like, we have to not only educate them, we have to kind of make them aware of what's going on.
No, you're absolutely right. It's the trust factor. You trust your own people, right? We're all Americans, so you should trust everyone in general, right?
Some of that, right?
But if you're Italian American, you're going to want an Italian attorney. They understand the culture, they understand the language. If you're Arab American, if you're Hispanic American, you get it. Like, you want somebody who understands the culture and the language, and you're able to freely express and not be judged.
And I feel there's exactly what you're saying. There's a comfortability level there that goes along with it. So you just feel like, these are my people. And, for example of, an Irish guy going to an Italian guy to buy a car, he's always going to think he's trying to rip him off. Whereas it's just when you're with your people that that this is someone from my community that has my best interests. And listen, it's not always that way. There is always shady people in every community, but I do find that's funny, because from things that are really scary to, like, look, you're a professional. You've created this designation. Doctors, lawyers, realtors, insurance people, they all have these designations. For us ordinary folks like me, there are certain professions that you go to and look at in a certain way and hold them in a certain regard. And you want to make sure you're getting someone that you're comfortable with, regardless of the cultural effects of it. And you want to make sure that you're finding someone that has the expertise that you need to do the things that you want to do. And you can communicate with it and convey it to them what you're looking for. And from your end, conveying it back, this is what we can do. This is what's available within the law of what we're able to do.
Correct.
So you and your husband, you guys have been married for 10 years, 5 years, 10 years?
No, we have a complicated background.
So that was my next question. Tell us a little bit about your personal background. I mean,
Sure.
You guys have been together a while. He looped you into this whole area of law.
Sure. So we got to know each other in law school. We are not from the same background, so my parents did not approve. So it took us 9 long years to convince them to get married. So we just got married Christmas Eve of 2021. So it's been almost 2 years. Yeah, almost 2 years, a year and a half.
Well, first and foremost, your husband, if nothing else, it has stick-to-itiveness. That is a difficult situation to be in. I know I look like the innocent boy next door type, but I've also run into that with a previous relationship, and it is a difficult thing. It puts a little bit of undue stress on the relationship. So he had to prove to your family, hey, look, I'm the guy. I am him. I'm the one. I'm going to be here. So he had to keep showing out and showing them that he was, not just talking the talk, that he was walking the walk. So 9 years is a long time to put in that time to make sure they knew.
He's a super patient man. I have to give it to him, even though some days I want to kill him, but he's super patient.
That doesn't make you any different than any other wife walking the earth. There are days I love him, but there's days I don't like him is kind of the recurring theme of marriage, I guess you could say. So when you guys aren't, knee deep in estates and wills and all these different probate cases and digging up gold in the backyard, when you guys aren't doing all of that stuff, what do you guys do for fun? You guys have kids? You have dogs? You like to travel?
We travel a ton. We have a 5-month-old little boy who travels with us. Thank you. We travel a ton for work, actually. We're traveling to Jerusalem on Friday. We're going to be working from there for a few weeks. And that's where my family's from. So we're going to go and visit. We also play tennis. We love tennis. So we try to do that, and we love to read.
And what part of Tampa? I mean, this office is in what, Tampa Palms, right? Or New Tampa?
New Tampa.
And what part of town, do you guys live in New Tampa? Are you close to the office?
No, so we actually live in South Florida, but we go to New Tampa probably 2 to 3 times a month because my parents are there, and also my sister's there. And I grew up about 45 minutes from there.
Okay, so you're in South Florida right now, and then you just come up a couple. So who's day to day? Who is running the New Tampa office?
So we have an associate attorney. She lives in New Tampa. So she runs the office. She practices in our family division. Okay. And then we also have other team members that also work out of that office.
Okay. And then the I guess the big follow-up question I have for you is a very, very vital question is, what's a book you've read recently that you would recommend to the listeners?
Oh, gosh. So we just now implemented EOS. I don't know if you've heard of it. And let me look up the book name. Hold on. I can't believe I'm blanking on it.
So, all right. So then let me back up while looking for that. So the books that you look at, the books that you're into are more developmental stuff. Like, you're not reading Harry Potter. That's not the books that you like to read. You like to read how to be a gangster in business or how to, like, that type of stuff.
Yes. Like entrepreneurship type books.
Yep. Gotcha.
How to build better systems, but
Atomic Habits, things like that.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So then we definitely we'll have to find out what book you would recommend for because the whole point of this podcast is, yes, it's people are listening to it, but it's really for business owners to kind of hear a little bit about what they might need to do and learn from other entrepreneurs. So you kind of talked about one of my questions already. You touched on it a little bit of a hardship and how you've overcome that. I would think having your family not accept the love of your life, that's kind of a hardship. Is there another hardship? I mean, every time I talk to an attorney, the hardship they always talk about is law school. It was passing the bar exam and going to law school was their hardship. Is there something that you have in your background that you would say, look, this is something that was kind of crummy and I worked my way through it and now I'm better for it?
Yeah, so I would definitely say my love life was one of the hardest things I've had to go through. But I think more importantly, when my parents immigrated to this country in the late 80s, we didn't grow up with much. So we had government assistance, right? And so we never grew up in a home. We always lived in apartments, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartments. My parents worked 3 jobs each. So I knew that growing up, I didn't want the same life necessarily. And so my parents are now retired. We take care of them, us 3 girls. I'm the oldest of the girls. And so I think that has taught me to be the strong entrepreneur that owns these 6 to 7 offices and growing all over the state of Florida. That my parents were the reason.
You know, when I hear a story like that, I have friends that are Cuban that came here with literally with nothing, with like a shopping bag of clothes, and became super successful. And I just think in like your dad's case, he's a physician. He's attained a certain level where he grew up. And then he has to come here and start all over. And I'm assuming he's taking whatever jobs he can get his hands on to provide for you and your sisters. So when I hear stories like that, it always reminds me of my friend Sam. Actually, his name is Sam also. He's Cuban, and telling his story. I learned about the Cuban Missile Crisis when I was like 5 from my parents' friends who had lived through it. But yeah, those types of stories, I mean, that truly is the American dream. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. Come here with limited resources, use the system properly and not make it a lifestyle, make it the bridge that it's supposed to be to help you get to where you want to be, and then have a success story like you and your sisters and your firms.
Yeah, no, we can't thank this country enough in the sense of it gave us the opportunity that my parents didn't have. So they came from nothing, and now we've been able to create businesses and a life that we never thought was possible. And for that, we'll always be thankful.
And as we start to kind of wrap this up a little bit, Sam, if there's one thing people listening to this, you want them to go, look, this is the reason why we have to use this firm. You know, we have to go to the Florida Probate and Family Law Firm for our estate planning needs, our marital needs, our family needs. What's the one thing they should take away from this?
The one thing that they should take away from this is if they're looking to it's actually multiple things. If they're looking to get married, they need to talk to an attorney about a prenuptial agreement. Everyone needs one. And if they have children or they have assets, they really, really, really need to get their estate planning in order, because it's going to save their families and, everyone involved time and money. And I don't think that people understand that. You have to get your affairs in order before it's too late.
Yeah, it is. Like, I kind of made a joke of it earlier, and I get that you're an attorney and that's part of what you do and that's important. But what ultimately ends up happening in a lot of these cases, in divorces especially, one person is upset and they, out of spite, kind of prolong things. And then the only people that really win in those cases are the attorneys. And all the money that's in the estate just gets tied up in all that. And it could be the same way with this. So correct. As we wrap up here, the last question, I guess, the big question is, what is the easiest way, other than going to that Melrose Place modeling website that you guys have, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Is it through the website? Is it through a phone number? What's the best point of entry if we need your services? So
you can follow me on all social media at Lawyer Lady Boss, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of that. The website, you can also contact us, www.flpfl.com, floridaprobateandfamilylaw.com, or you can call our office at 813-999-3134.
Awesome. Sam, so guys, if you're listening to this, Sam's family came over to this country and started this juggernaut of law firms around the Tampa, Florida, South Florida market. They have come up from nothing. She's made herself the Lawyer Lady Boss, okay? She's got a cool handle. She's got a crazy cool website. Her husband has stuck by her side for 9 years until the family came on board. They have a 5-month-old son who's probably going to be a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. He's going to be digging up gold in somebody's backyard to settle a probate case. Definitely check out the website. Sam Abukadir, the founder of the Florida Probate and Family Law Firm. Sam, thank you so much for being on with us today.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast Pasco. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnppasco.com. That's gnppasco.com, or call 813-922-3610.